So now we're going to take a look at the elbow muscles, starting with the elbow flexors. And of course, our favorite elbow flexor, biceps brachii, it crosses the shoulder and the elbow, so it's a two-joint muscle, and it crosses the forearm, so it's really a three-joint muscle if you want to go there. So it has two different heads. That's where the name biceps comes from. The long head attaches to the supraglenoid tubercle. So that is up here at the top of the glenoid fossa, and then it comes down through the bicipital groove or the intertubercular groove. That's where it gets its name. And the short head attaches to the coracoid process. That's its origin. So the effect you get is the two different heads going this way, and it comes down anteriorly, crosses the elbow, and attaches to the bicipital tuberosity or the radial tuberosity on the radius. So in effect, it can elevate the shoulder, flex the shoulder, it can flex the elbow, and it can supinate the forearm. Okay, so it does all those different things. It's not the major shoulder flexor, but it's an assister, and it's a big assister for shoulder flexion. The biceps, like a lot of big muscles, they like to get in on things. So the brachialis is the main flexor of the elbow, because the biceps, it's up there working at the shoulder, it's down there working at the forearm. It's also bending the elbow, but the brachialis, its main job is the elbow, and that's what it does. So I call it the keyboard muscle because when you're sitting with your elbows bent and your hands on the keyboard, your palms are pronated, and so your biceps are on stretch a little bit. Your brachialis is doing the elbow bending. It's deep to the biceps. It attaches, its origin is on the anterior surface of the distal humerus, and its insertion is on the coronoid process of the ulna. So you can see how when you flex the elbow, that little guy shortens right up. That's what it does. It's at its best when your forearm is in pronation because you're neutralizing the biceps a little bit. So the brachialis that's its main thing. The brachioradialis is a long muscle. It attaches on that originates on the lateral supracondylar ridge of the humerus, and it goes down to the styloid process of the radius. So you can see when it's fully pronated, it's not really at its best, and when you're fully supinated, it's not at its best. So it's when you're in what we call a neutral position, halfway between pronation and supination, where the brachioradialis is at its best, because that's where it has its strongest line of pull. And that is a functional motion for us. A lot of times we're picking stuff up with our thumbs pointing superiorly. So the brachioradialis is a really good functional elbow flexor. And it's going to pronate you or supinate from full pronation to neutral or full supination to neutral. So it has a little bit of line of pull for pronation and supination in certain positions. So the major elbow extensors are the triceps brachii. So they're on the posterior side of the arm. They cross the shoulder. The long head of the triceps brachii crosses the shoulder and the elbow. The long head originates on the infraglenoid tubercle of the scapula, and all of the heads of the triceps insert on the olecranon process. So we get elbow extension. So the elbow's bent, the muscle shortens and extends the elbow. The lateral head, so just like the cuneiforms where there's the medial, middle, and lateral, the triceps have the long head, the lateral head, and the medial head. So just to make it interesting. So the long head crosses the shoulder. The lateral head is on the posterior humerus lateral to the radial groove, and the medial head is on the posterior humerus medial to the radial groove. So you can see one head, another head, and the third head. So they all do elbow extensors. The long head is an assister for shoulder extension. The lateral head and the medial head don't cross the shoulder, so they can't function at and shoulder extension. And they all get the radial nerve, like everything, on the posterior side of the upper extremity. So there's this itty bitty little muscle called the anconeus, and I got a special itty bitty rubber band just to signify it. Its origin is the lateral epicondyle of the humerus, and its insertion is the olecranon process. You can see it has a super dinky line of pull for elbow extension with limited torque because it has a really small moment arm, so not very much torque. It can be considered a medial lateral stabilizer, and it's one of those weird muscles that not everybody has. In some people, it's considered to just be part of the triceps. So it's an elbow stabilizer. So the supinators, the primary supinators, are the biceps brachii and the supinator muscle. The extensor pulsus longus, which we'll talk about in the wrist, and extensor indicis have a little bit of line of pull for supination. The brachioradialis can pronate or supinate depending on what position you're starting in. So basically what it does is it brings the forearm to the neutral mid position. So if you're in pronation, it supinates. If you're in supination, it pronates to the middle position. So the biceps brachii, we talked about it earlier. The supinator has a super cool line of pull. It's one of the only muscles that wraps around a bone. Its nickname is the ice cream muscle because that's the motion used to scoop ice cream, that supination motion. So its origin is on the lateral epicondyle of the humerus and the adjacent ulna. So it sort of has that. It wraps around, it goes in between the radius and the ulna, and it wraps around the radius. So it actually has that sort of spiral line of pull to do that supination. So it's pronated, and it pulls the hand into supination. It's that really cool spiral line of pull, unique in the body. There's no other muscle that has a spiral line of pull like that. So I think that's pretty cool. So the pronators, luckily they have the word pronator in their name. That makes it easy. The pronator teres attaches on the medial epicondyle of the humerus, and it has a humeral head and an ulnar head. So you can think of it as a little bit on the radius, a little bit on the ulna. And then it goes to the lateral surface of the mid-radius. So it has that sort of vertical, sort of oblique line of pull that's going to pull you into pronation. You can see how it shortens when it pulls you into pronation. So it has a little bit of assist for elbow flexion because it attaches on the humerus. The pronator quadratus, it's the deepest muscle in the forearm. It originates on the anterior surface of the distal ulna, and it inserts on the anterior surface of the distal radius. So I need the really tiny rubber band for that one. So it goes right across here. As it shortens, it pulls the radius into pronation. So tiny little rectangular muscle gets the median nerve. Like a lot of things on the lateral side of the anterior forearm. So the one muscle that we haven't talked about is the Coracobrachialis. So what's the deal with that? Excuse me. It's this little muscle up here from the coracoid to the humerus. It has a little bit of line of pull for flexion, but not much. It's mostly an anterior stabilizer of the shoulder.